I'm making a Star Wars short film and I need some shots of a ship flying through hyperspace, but I want to make the shots more interesting than the traditional effect by adding in this smoky dust that you see in Stargate Universe. The first step was to create the tunnel. I used a very large cylinder with tapered ends and an icosphere at each end of the tunnel, well, one icosphere that was duplicated with the mirror modifier. The icosphere had a pretty simple material. It's just an emission node with quite a high strength and a bit of a blue tint. Now this renders at pure white, but with a glare modifier it gives it a nice blue glow. The shader setup for the main tube wasn't too complicated. I borrowed most of the nodes from a tutorial and I'll link to the tutorial in the video's description, but essentially it's just a noise texture with some colour added via a colour ramp, and then all of that is fed into an emission shader. To make the tunnel move, I used a mapping node, and then I animated the Y location by using a value node with the frame attribute. Looking at this maths node here, the lower the divide number, the slower the tunnel moves. If you want to copy my setup, then these are the values I used for the color ramp node. Then I added this model of an ETA class transport shuttle that I made a few years ago. The animation for the shuttle was all done with noise modifiers on the X and Z location axis and all 3 rotation axes. If you want to copy my animation settings, here they are. Finally, it was time for the smoke effect. I made a very basic shape that was slightly larger than my shuttle model, and this is the object that's going to be interacting with the smoke. Then I created a few more smoke emitter objects. Because I had these separate objects, I was able to animate the density with another noise modifier, and this gave the whole smoke simulation a bit more of a random look. I won't go in depth about all the details, but these are my emitter settings, and this is the domain setting. I tried making the smoke simulation at a 256 resolution, but that was probably overkill and Blender kept crashing, so I ended up settling with a resolution of 150 for the other shots. Now, once the shot was finished, I combined the blend file and the rather large smoke cache into a zip file, not forgetting to bundle all the files inside Blender, and then the zip could be uploaded to the render farm. Talking of render farms, I'm going to be using my own online rendering service, Graded Blue Render Farm. It has the cheapest prices available and a nice, easy to use modern web user interface. So if you want the most affordable Blender online rendering solution, have a look at Graded Blue Render Farm, and the link to that's in the description below. Now, whilst that's rendering, let's talk about what happens after hyperspace. These shots were much easier to make. All I needed was a ship, a path, and a follow path constraint. The actual dropout effect is really quick. I only needed 10 frames of animation on the follow path constraint. Then to sell the effect, I scaled the ship down to 0 at the start of the animation and then back up to full size 2 frames before the end of the animation. I experimented around a bit with different values, but you really need those 2 frames at normal scale, otherwise the effect doesn't look as good. Probably because it breaks the illusion that the ship is travelling really fast, and you can tell that I'm just cheating by adjusting the scale. To finish off the scene, I used an empty parented to the ship to position the camera via a track 2 constraint. Keyframing the influence to increase after the initial dropout effect also helps to sell the look. I used Ian Hubert's camera shake add-on with the Zeek 2D profile set at a 0.5 influence. If you want the add-on, once again you can find it in the video's description. When using an add-on like this with a render farm, you need to remember to apply the modifiers before uploading the project. A few completed renders later, and I'm one step closer to finishing my Star Wars short film.